Hello and welcome. Um, in this talk, we have Amaresh Mohan from PRM18, who is the Chief Officer at Flutterwave. And the topic he's going to discuss today is navigating through various shapes of career journeys to find one's niche. And this event will be moderated by his batchmate, Dushyant Mishra. We at IE had been discussing this adda talks with Amaresh for the last 5 or 6 months. He's a busy professional, but ultimately he agreed and we finalized a timeline. And from the side of IA, I especially thanks him that he took out so much time after so much going in his professional life. And also we would like to thank Dushyanda. He has moderated few talks before, but whenever we have approached him to moderate any of the sessions, he had been always gladly come forward and said yes. And I also thanks to all the audience who are here on a weekend. It is a symbol of their enthusiasm and also their interest in contributing to our community. So I will hand over this session to Dushyanda for the introduction and moderation of this session. And I would request all the participants to keep themselves on mute. And if they have any queries or questions, they can raise their hand or put their questions in the chat box. Those will be taken by our moderator Dushyanda as they come along. Thank you very much. Amrishta and Dushyanda, all to you.
Thanks, Ritesh.
Thank you, Ritesh. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Amaresh, speaker for the evening. And to begin with, I would want to thank IA for creating this platform where we get to, listen to some fantastic people from the IRMAn alumni community who are doing great in their respective careers in different parts of the world. And we get to learn from them. I feel envious of, while I am privileged to be conducting this session and being a part of this, but I feel envious that it would have been wonderful if such sessions were available back when we were graduating and coming out. Mess lawns used to be the place where we would learn. Remember, Amaresh?
Absolutely.
Every time a senior urban would come, we would flock around them and try and gather as much wisdom as we could. So today is my opportunity of talking to you and creating that opportunity for everybody else to gain from your wisdom. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you. As I mentioned separately as well, IA has been more than gracious in accommodating. It was supposed to be a week ago. Unfortunately, my travel schedule was such that it had to be pushed out. I'm so glad that it's finally happening. And I am very happy that you could take time, Dushyant, to moderate. You, being a career coach, are absolutely the right person to be able to sharpen the points and take out nuggets of wisdom from a very ordinary life of anybody. And I'm very happy to see a number of PRM18 folks here, Apu, Arshad, Nilotpal, as well as other members of the community. Let's start.
Yes, shall we? So, Amaresh, to introduce you to the audience, I would just say that we are blessed we take a lot of pride. I'm not blessed, I would say we take a lot of pride at PRM18 that we had a chance to study with some of the finest people IRMA produced, and you are one of them. You had a career across different geographies, different domains, which we'll be talking about in detail. So I would ask the audience to wait and listen to the journey as it unfolds over the next 30-35 minutes or so. So, Amaresh, tell me this. What is the difference between a role, a job, and a career?
Interesting question. Let me start from the middle one, a job. That is typically what is posted, advertised. It's sort of a legal contract. That's what HR would talk about, and one signs on a piece of paper to come in a company. But each job may have more than one role that one can play being in that job. And think about it that someone in a company has the same designation, and from HR grade wise or even designation wise, they are all at the same level. Let's say manager finance or senior manager marketing, etc. But the roles they play could be very different, even on exact same level with the same designation. Each job may also have description of the role, and the role is a bit more than just the legal contract. It actually talks about distance from management, in the sense that where do you fit in? How do you help the company? Let's say somebody, in addition to being a director of finance in a company, is also site leader for that company's office in that city. And that is not the job. That person is leading a role in addition to whatever he or she is doing. Or even if you're not talking about outside of finance, within finance, one could be a signatory to certain documents. One could be sitting on a subsidiaries board, or many other things. Even leading people would be a role that you play within a job. So I would think that typically what we sign or what we accept is a job, but a job can have more than a role that you can play. Some of it is defined by the company. Some of it we voluntarily identify and raise our hands, or we start doing. I have had quite a few of these additional roles that either came to me or I raised my hands to do over time. And of course, career, as we all know, that's relatively easier one. It's a sequence of various jobs and roles that we have that, when put together, builds our overall professional journey or trajectory. So that's how I think about it. That's my very simple definition of the three terms.
Insightful. May I request you to unshare the screen, Amaresh, so that we can see you?
Yes.
Yes, that's better. So you said that the job is the contract that we sign. A job can have many roles. The roles can change from time to time, depending on what location, what the circumstances are. You can volunteer for a role. You can grab a role. I heard that. That was very interesting. And a role can be assigned to you. Whereas a job is a career is a series of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct in my
That's
understanding?
Right. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Now, when I look back, when I signed up for this session and you talked about that you're going to talk about shapes of careers, I've been ever since curious that what is the shape of my career? And I'm sure a lot of our audience are curious about that. So
we can definitely analyze that. I'm sure in the framework that we're going to talk about in a bit, we can definitely look at yours and many of our friends who are here. Where does that fit in the framework?
It's curious to know that. So how and we have a lot of youngsters who would be watching this video if they've not joined us now. What do you think goes into defining a career, or how do you build a career?
There are many parts, and that's why the title of this talk is, taking the various shapes of a career journey. Sometimes it is a very intentional, thought through decision that I want to be this. Personally, I have envied people who knew long back when I was in school, someone said, oh, I'm going to do that, or in college or somewhere. And those are folks who have possibly seen a mentor, a role model. Think about a profession like doctors, children becoming doctors. They've had a role model at home, or it could be similar for a lawyer, for an administrative officer, etc. There can also be another way broadly, which is, and it's a very simplified example again, think of it as playing different levels of a video game. So you start playing one game and you sort of unlock to the next level. It could be a completely different setting. If you think about car racing, it could be a Macau track. And the next one could be, French Riviera. It could be completely different, or it could also be multi automobile, and you're not prepared. So you have to adapt to the new machine, adapt to the new track, adapt to competition, etc., etc. So broadly, those are the two. As I mentioned, I don't fall in the first category of knowing very well where I wanted to be 10, 20, 30 years. I fall in the second bucket, wherein you start playing each level of the game to the best of your ability, and then wait for the next one to unfold, and then you play that the best of your ability.
Wow, I just love that video game example. I play a lot of those car racing games, and when you were talking, it actually is every level that you unlock is very different. And the only thing common is that your ability to drive that car or simulate that car that is there on the screen. But the challenges that come your way, the things that get thrown at you, the jumps, the bridges, all those things could be very, very different. How wonderfully have you explained? So which was the first track that you played on?
The first track, pre-IRMA, I started with spending some time at an NGO in Himachal, and this was during my undergrad days at a college in Delhi, and that is how IRMA came in my life. After IRMA, I joined GCMMF, or as we call lovingly, Federation, along with Apu, who is here, Apurva Mishra, who is still going strong at Federation. That was for about 2 years or so, and within that, there were very different roles. We started our training in sales, then moved to marketing. I led a few, not the leading brands, Apu, from sales perspective, butter and cheese and others. I wasn't brand manager of those. I had what I would call as the tail brands, Nutrimel, chocolate. There was Sagar tea, coffee, whitener, quite a few. But whatever came my way, I took on, including non-brand management responsibilities. There was something called production planning. I took that on. It was try to map all the output from all the dairy, the district units, and all the different products, dry, chill, frozen, so that we are matching demand and supply. That was a very interesting analytical exercise that at any point 2 or 3 people would do in the company. From there, a few personal decisions or personal reasons took me across India and then later globally. So from marketing at Federation, marketing at Pepsi. At that time, they were launching Pepsi Foods. Kurkure, which is a massive brand now, was a nascent brand. At that time, nobody knew. It was chips. People knew Tropicana juices and the chips brands. Again, it was a bit of a tail brand at Pepsi Foods. The Kurkure, I remember having run SAF and CAF campaign at that time. From dairy to food like Kurkure was an interesting journey. And from there, going into a telco. In between, I took a break. So at that time, we were also moving cities because of my partner then trying to be in the same location. So I quit Pepsi, which was my dream job at that time, to do nothing and just to be at the same location as my partner. And while I was enjoying my self-given sabbatical, someone from IRMA community reached out for a brand manager role at a telco, which was Birla Tata T&T at that time, which became Ida Cellular. And I was there to drive and run that campaign, which again, for a marketing person, was sort of a dream opportunity in a way. You sleep And it's one brand. When you wake up, it's a completely different brand across all different channels, from billboards to TV commercials to business cards, everything. And while I was there, I got a call from a bank.
I'll interject you. I'll
Sure.
interject you here, Amaresh. So this move from Pepsi to Idea, and you mentioned that you were noticed by somebody who saw the wonderful work that you were doing. And that's what gets noticed. If you are doing good work, somebody will notice you, and we don't know who those people are who are following our career. And you were noticed. When you talked about sleeping on one day with a particular brand, and the next day when you wake up to a new world, which is Idea. Did your experience from any of your previous jobs come in handy here?
Oh, absolutely. Both from Federation as well as from Pepsi. And the two were very different, but really career shaping experiences. At Federation, obviously with the mandate that we have, we are trying to give back maximum to our producers as well as consumers, learning to work with, less budgets, but drive maximum impact. And that's where things like billboards, as we all know, and we all love the Amul billboards and that strategy, and also many other communication channels. And then Pepsi operates with a very different marketing budget, and being able to do research, etc. Even the name Idea, which at that time sounded quite weird, but we had done a lot of research to be able to come up with that name. So I combined the learnings from both GCMMF as well as Pepsi Food in the role at what was Birla Tata AT&T at that time, and then Idea. Some of which were not there so much, like at Amul, we didn't go into TV commercials so often. The budgets were a bit limited, and also how it was developed. It was more developed in Bombay, and we would basically, the decisions were more made by the agency. However, at Pepsi, it was direct involvement of the brand manager. Each brand manager had a significant budget, and we would decide that.
And
so that
from here
came to help in Idea as well.
And what was the next track?
Next was very surprising. One fine day, I get a call from a bank, Citibank. They were looking to hire marketing folks in their consumer business. I had never done banking. And what they saw was not dairy and food and telco. What they saw was 3 different consumer brands, and how I've been part of established and growing brands all across. And they wanted to grow in India. They were already on the corporate banking side and more B2B, and they wanted to deepen on B2C. So personal banking and specifically wealth management. But that involved moving to Chennai. And so I wasn't very keen, but somehow convinced me. It was, again, big portfolio with a lot of free hand for me to be able to run and shape it the way I wanted to. So again, the professional curiosity and that empowerment took me there. So I ended up going from dairy to food to telco to a bank in the first 4 roles, all in marketing.
A foreign bank, actually.
A foreign bank, true.
Yes. It's a very different entity, very, very different way of doing business there.
That's right.
And what happened after that?
So once again, a personal factor, because again, I found myself in a city which was different from where my partner was, wanted to be in the same location. So it came up in a discussion with it was actually a business review with my super boss's boss. And we went through the content very quickly. We were looking green across all the things we had to do. And then he started asking about my personal situation. And I mentioned, yeah, we're doing weekend trips, etc. And he said, no, that's not the way, this early in a career, etc. And he facilitated my move from marketing to sales, because sales was the only thing that was available in that location, with a very clear assurance that, hey, if it doesn't work out, you can come back to marketing anytime. And in my head, I wanted to burn the bridge behind me. I'm not coming back. I have to make it work, because there was a very strong personal reason. it was a struggle to start with, moving from sitting in a corporate office headquarters as we all salespeople make fun of. There is a truth to it. Like you don't have the ground reality. It's one thing to make the strategy and PowerPoints, another thing to get someone to write the check in sales. So that was an interesting move. I did okay, I suppose, because then I grew from as an individual contributor to leading a large portfolio and teams to being a location head. And this was at Citibank. So they have a position called City Senior. There's one person in the entire location who speaks with media and regulators across all businesses. So that I ended up sort of growing into that role, which was also interesting. That even if you don't oversee a particular business and there is a regulatory complaint, you have to be responsible for that. So
this was your opportunity of managing multiple roles in a particular job for the first time, I guess.
In a very explicit way, yes. But even if you see back, as I was talking about, even at Federation, there was the brand manager role, but there is also the production planning role, plus a few others. And of course, at Federation, we were all very agile and flexible, so we would take on different things depending on what was needed. But in a larger, bigger footprint way, City for sure.
More explicit, I would say, more well established.
Yep. Business continuity, working with law enforcement locally, with media, growing the business, everything. Where should our office be? All those. It's not just the sales target, but it's much more than that.
And what happened? Which organization did you move on to after this?
After that was Kotak. That again was interesting. Someone from Citibank had moved to Kotak Bank and already sort of knew about me. And Kotak at that time wanted to launch their version of wealth management, which is called Privy League. So they wanted someone who knows both marketing and has been on the ground, so knows the practical aspect of it. Now, I didn't know that I was building that intentionally. At all points, I was taking action based on what suited me and my personal needs. And a lot of times, as I shared, movement to locations and other places was all because of personal needs. But when companies looked at my profile, they saw something completely different that I had not seen. So Kotak reached out, and I ended up going as head of product. So now I'm moving from marketing to sales to product management. And I headed personal banking and wealth management. That was what I was hired for. And then a whole new business got added later on, retail bullion.
Wow. So you joined Kotak, if I remember, this was in 2004, 2005.
I think it was around then. Yeah, 2006. Yeah.
That was early days for Kotak as a bank. They had just entered. They were probably less than 4 years old in the system, the entire space. You would have gotten a wonderful exposure.
Very early on. I just to make it real, Kotak Bank was not even in the main BKC, the Bandra Kurla complex, where you have all the banks. It was in the fringes of BKC in Kalina, and it was relatively compared to ICICI and other places. You were at ICICI. That's right, Nilutpal. And I used to hang out with a lot of folks, IRMANs in ICICI. So we had to go to the main BKC. On that floor that I was at Kotak Bank, the number 2 person in the bank, Deepak Gupta, his office was right next to mine. Head of consumer bank back then, Manian, who now heads up investment bank, Kotak Bank, was at the same floor, and many others. It was a very collegial kind of an environment. There were no hierarchy or levels coming in the way of being able to launch a business. It was very different from Citibank.
So, this is how I define success. Why would somebody move from that?
From Kotak?
Yeah. With
Well,
what you have described, I would have stayed there.
yeah. No, and nobody believed when I told them that I'm moving on. It was probably a midlife crisis setting in early or what, but I wanted to, so far all the decisions I had made, career decisions, were all based on some other factor, forcing factors in a way. But this one decision was to go to the US and I take a break, and then sort of relook at what I want to do. So it was more going back to the classroom decision. And nobody at Kotak bought it because I was doing fairly well. The CEO kept telling me till the last day. I remember he was a very, very sharp, very intelligent, and also a very funny person. And he said, last day, ab to bata de kahan ja raha hai? Like he was sure that I was going to competition. So nobody believed because, like I said, I was well placed. So I quit that role, heading 3 products nationally to become a student, take on a massive loan, and of course, restart in a way. There is a question from Apu. Should we take it now, or should we do it at the end, Dushyant?
Just check this. In the relevance of IRMAn now. We will, Apurv, we'll hold on to this question because the journey is at a very interesting part right now, and I'm curious to know what happens next.
So I end up, at a master's program in the US, and I'm looking around. What else should I do now? Most of my career, or all of my career till then, had been on the consumer side, consumer and retail, B2C. And so I said, okay, let me challenge myself on the B2B side. And so I threw my hat for investment banking, which for generally in the US, people go for masters after 3-4 years of work after undergrad, and typically much younger. Typical profile is they're still single. Why it's relevant in work context is that they have flexibility to move around, flexibility to put in the hours, etc. I was going already married with a child with 8 years, 9 years of experience. So I was not the typical profile, but somehow I did manage to get into what I wanted to push myself and challenge myself in, which is investment banking, at Bank of America, which is one of the large global banks, not just in the US. So I found myself on the Wall Street doing mergers and acquisitions, but there is connection. I was covering consumer and retail. So everything that I'd done in the past sort of came together in a way that I'm leveraging my experience across Federation, Pepsi, telcos, Idea, Citi on the consumer side, to now implement that for deals. And typically a bulge bracket bank would pick up deals which are more than $1 billion in transaction volume. So these are obviously massive fees for the banks. So that's where I ended up after 2 years break and doing a master's in the US.
Would have coincided with the meltdown, if I'm not wrong.
Right after. So while I was there, the financial crisis sort of kept picking up, and it reached a point where Bank of America was forced, nudged, encouraged to merge with or acquire Merrill Lynch and a few other businesses that were not doing very well standalone. They ended up having to take federal funds in the US, which also meant that all internationals like me, because I was still on international visa, will have to either relocate outside of the US to Mexico or Canada, or move to another company. So I decided to move to another company. And that was a very interesting decision because in the US, it is always the H-1B game that you have to play. That application has to go in April 1st, and the outcome comes in October. and I made the decision to switch industries on 15th of March. So I had 2 weeks. Somehow, I managed to convince Microsoft to file H-1B for me. There was no job. They had not figured out what job they're going to put me in, but they were convinced enough to go ahead and file H-1B, which I didn't know was a possibility. I found out later that all tech companies do that, that if they know that they want to hire somebody, they file the H-1B first. And they have 6 months to figure out where they want to put the person. So I went from investment banking at Bank of America to corporate finance at Microsoft in their Redmond, the headquarters in the US.
Oh, what a move. I'm
Ah,
trying to from selling banking products in Ahmedabad to heading products for Kotak, moving to investment bank in Wall Street, and actually at Redmond, the headquarters. Wonderful. And
by the way, when I was selling investment products in Ahmedabad, I had to learn Gujarati because while I did not learn Gujarati at IRMA 2 years or at Federation of another 2 years, I learned in 1 year or less than a year in my role at Citibank because
no Gujju will write a check to somebody who's non-speaking. Eh?
absolutely, you'll always be an outsider if you don't speak the language. So that was my first competency to pick up is to learn the language. And over time, it became, I got to a point of trust with some of the customers that they would share with me the business plans, their family plans, even more than what they would be sharing with their business partners or even family members.
I'll bring you back. I'll bring you back to, let's go to Microsoft, corporate finance, and
Sure.
what happened next in the journey.
So I ended up at Microsoft, and a lame joke that I used to run is that despite how I look, I'm not an engineer. So anyone who looks like me in the Seattle campus is an engineer, right? Including you, Dushyant. I'm not. And so a lot of the conversations there in the rooms would get very technical very fast. The finance part was easy because obviously I was doing something a little bit more complex than that before going corporate finance, doing revenue recognition for Windows business was my role. And because it's such a large company that everything is sort of broken down in small parts, fair to say that I wasn't feeling completely utilized with all the experience I had in financial services, was not being leveraged also. And then that's when PayPal came calling. PayPal was headquartered in California. They were much smaller than what they are today. And they were a subsidiary of eBay, and they were an alternate payment method. So I jumped at the opportunity. I went ahead and met with them. It was at the crossroads of technology and financial services. I don't believe the term fintech had been coined yet. So I joined fintech before it formally became fintech, and it was great. The campus life and California weather. I was also moving away from cold, starting in
And
Michigan to Chicago. Yep.
This is where you also changed your role from corporate finance to?
Wait for it. So corporate finance to risk management. I had never done this before that. And not only it was risk management, it was risk management in Latin America. And my
Wow.
joke used to be, I do look Mexican, but I'm not. Are you sure? And so they put me to lead risk management for Mexico, Brazil, the entire Latin America. And the company was relaunching businesses at that time. Now, while PayPal is a massive brand in developed markets, it was not very well known in that part of the world. So it was a steep learning curve, very steep.
I'm sure you climbed it well. And after PayPal, you've been in the risk space in the last 2 or 3 organizations. What's your current role?
Yeah, my current role is Chief Risk Officer of Flutterwave, which is a US-based company with operations in Africa. And their mission is to connect Africa to the world, through payments. I'm based in Singapore. I've been based in Singapore for a while. They somehow ended up finding me here. They weren't looking to find someone in Singapore. They were looking to find someone in Africa or Europe, possibly US. But I happen to be based here, and I joined them. My commute has become very long. In this role, I end up also playing role on all executive decisions, plus managing the board. The board is investor board to a large extent. A lot of the VCs that have invested money, so they would like to have direct line to the chief risk officer to understand what's going on, as well as regulators. So although it is risk, but it has evolved a fair bit in the last many years of risk management. PayPal was still very hands-on risk management in the initial years. Then when I moved to APAC, I got into a role wherein I was a signatory to the non-US entity. So all quarterly and annual filings, I would have to sign off on that. And then from there, Stripe, which is another payments company, global, and from there to an Indonesian super app, GoTo, which has Gojek and Tokopedia, and then now in my current role.
Lovely. From marketing to sales to product to investment banking and corporate finance to risk, and now, as I say, is more about not just risk, actually stakeholder management.
That's right.
That's a lot of things you've done. So now I'm curious to know that the shape that you've talked about, the different careers. I would love to listen from you.
Sure. Let me. I mean, this is a very simple representation or simplified representation of what it could look like. Let me know if you're able to see the screen. So,
yes, we can.
Awesome. So it very broadly, I've just put in 4 different types of career shapes here. One is what is called the I shape. So I, T, Pi, and M. I is wherein one goes really deep. This is the example of a person I was talking about, someone who has had a role model or has made up mind in advance and just sticks to one thing and does that really well, and they become specialist at it. And we have a lot of examples within our own IRMA community. Someone who's been in one area and over time really excelled at it and rise to the top position in that. T would be where the top is broad skills. One does a bunch of different things and then picks one and goes really deep in that. And so on and so forth. In Pi, you have 2 different things that you're really good at. And in M, it is 3 different things. And there are many others, and you could have more legs added to the structure. But the common part is there is breadth on top, and then there is depth in one or more areas that you develop.
Interesting. And how would this map to your journey?
I think I'm more towards the right side of this slide, meaning ended up with one thing and I did that for across different roles, let's say marketing, and then going from there. If I go back, let's see, I think it's mapped on another slide. There you go. So it ended up having quite a few different legs. Not all of them were intended, but it so happened when I look back and when you're asking me to fit this in the template, started with on the marketing side, Amul, Pepsi Foods, Idea Cellular, Consumer Bank, was Citi. These were all marketing roles. And then moving to sales as an individual contributor, as a wealth advisor, to heading up a fairly large asset under management, to heading up an entire location across businesses, but all sales. And then going from there to a product role or owning entire P&L. And that was at Kotak, wherein across 3 different business lines, leading that, being completely responsible to all the costs, all the profits at margin level. And then in finance, from being an investment banker and M&A to corporate finance, obviously it tests depths of knowledge at that level. And then in risk,
Amaresh, these depths could be different in different roles for everybody.
It could be.
They don't have to be equal.
That's right. It does not have to be, all legs don't have to be equal in terms of amount of time, but it has to reach a certain degree of competence, and you're operating at a certain level. But yes, you're right. In terms of the duration, doesn't have to be the same all across. And then risk, again, different roles here. And then the current one where I am, which is a lot more of stakeholder management, internal and more so external.
Lovely. Now, I also see there's a pattern that in the first 3 legs that I am seeing, there is a lot of product that is there. The next 2, I see process, which is finance and risk, would have been a lot around processes. And the most recent one that you talked of, the CXO and the board, the stakeholder management, would be all about managing, influencing people around you.
That's a great segue to the next framework. As we are all developing our careers, what ends up being is very simplified version of 3 things that we end up managing the most. The product or whatever is the service or product that we are selling, the process that is behind it, the end-to-end, and then people. When I mean people, it's not just being a boss to a team. This is people management, largely stakeholder management. And over time, when one starts in the beginning, one has to master what is it that we are in the business of. And that's what we're loosely calling as product. Knowing that really well, and how does that differ from competition? I remember Apu and I were selling ice cream in Ahmedabad, and we needed to know the difference between our product versus quality walls. And, the famous story that Amul ice cream has milk cream versus others which will use oil, or many other things, about the profit structure, or how does a retailer make more money, etc., etc. Everything about the product, the entire bundle that you're selling. But then over time, it progresses into managing a lot of the back-end process. It could be logistics, it could be compliance, it could be anything, as one would need to know as heading a business or a profit center or a location. You do need to know the end-to-end. If anyone asks you, can you get this done in this much time? It's not so much about product, it's a lot more about the process that goes behind that. And there's overlap. And in the mid-career, as you can see, there are all the 3 things that are needed. It could be different weightage for different people or different roles. And then towards the end, it becomes more and more about stakeholder management. Even if one analyzes or does time audit of calendars, you'll see that it's more talking to people and more decisions being made in meetings rather than decisions being done or work being done outside of meetings. It's truly someone else there is a whole team to support the work, internal or even external. You could be engaging external consultants, etc., to augment the team that you have, but it's primarily to manage investors, regulators, people inside the company, and so on and so forth. Now, again, it's simplified framework just to make things easy to understand, but that's how I see things progressing over time.
Okay, so before we take on questions, if you have a message for our young audience, people who are in the first 5 to 7 years of their career, what would you tell them, given the 2 frameworks that you've shared? One is the multi different shapes of career, and this, what would you want them to do?
I think on the shapes of career, there's no right or wrong, absolutely. And it's really very personal in terms of what one chooses to do and what happens to one's life. as I was sharing my own personal story, a lot of it was not decisions that I had intended to make, but decisions that had to be made because of personal circumstances at that time. So to stay open to whatever shape the career is taking, and if you've already decided to be an I, for example, in the previous one, then that's great. If it's let's say if one ends up joining a consulting firm and picks up a lot of different industries and types of products, and then picks a role in industry to go deep in. Think about a lawyer, think about many professions when you sort of rotate across roles before picking one area. But knowing that is very important. Whenever you're making a choice that I want to do this, then also think about what does that lead me to? And it's not just about doing this role, but also what are the possible exits from here? So that's one message. The second is, as I was saying in my own example, that one can plan a lot, but life takes its own way sometimes. So whichever role one is in, just do it to the best of your competence and try to pick up a lot of different skill sets. As I was talking about playing a video game. So
I
at
love
each
that.
level,
I love that
at
example.
each, I know it's a very lame example. It's not a very serious one, but it resonates with me a lot. That at each way the game is set up, you're picking up different skills, different weapons that might be there, or different tracks, or depending on whatever the game is about. You're figuring out how to navigate through complex situations, which helps you in the next level or the next level that comes after. And a lot of times people are asking questions, when do I get the promotion, or when will I get more money? Those are all, as I think about it, lagging indicators. The leading indicators are picking up competence across these areas. If I've become really good at product, I understand what our product is, or what our bundle of offering that we have versus competition, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, let's start understanding what the process behind it, what all happens, upstream and downstream, and then the stakeholder management. And for everyone to focus more on a development plan, a 2 years, 3 years development plan that has elements of these, is a much better way to get that promotion or get that raise than asking for it directly. It's when you focus on the leading indicators like these competency, lagging indicators have to follow. There is no question. Sometimes it could be delayed. We can call it timing, call it politics, whatever it is. But that's the only thing is in one's control, competency building. But this talk was less about me giving a way of success or how something can work or formula. It was more about, even if it looks like things are not going as per plan and things are going very differently, you'll still be okay, because professional career can take very different shapes. And another thing that I would mention is, a lot of times when I made decisions, when I had more than one options, I was looking at things that one usually looks at. How senior is the person that I'm going to be reporting to? How big is the budget and things like that? And oftentimes when I made the decision based on personal factors like geography, is this location where I'll be happy? Those decisions worked out being much better for me. So if on the personal side, if one is more settled, it's quite highly likely that you're going to get a lot more out of that role versus being distracted. If you're constantly having to make weekend trips to meet with family or things like that, that distraction is not going to help with being able to build the competence. So those are very simple 3 things. There's no shape better than others in terms of career trajectory. Focus on building the leading indicators, the competency, and also in making decisions or choices, prioritize the personal factors, prioritize the geography, the location, etc., and other things over what sounds like the right things to focus
How insightful is that? I wish I can start my career all over again, armed with all this wisdom. You may unshare the screen. Let's have everybody on the screen, and we'll now take questions. Appu's question, I'll rephrase it for you.
Yeah,
Amaresh, who do you hire from IRMA?
of course. And I've hired a lot of people from IRMA at PayPal in Singapore. And Nilotpal knows this because that person had worked with him at another company. I was looking for someone for financial underwriting, and we found somebody from the IRMA network, and he moved from India to Singapore and did really well.
Appu, does that answer your question? No. So I am okay. Now the next question is.
Hang on, I think Apu is unmuted. Maybe he wants to add or ask something else.
Sure.
Yeah, it's okay. But apart from hiring a few people, how relevant do you think IRMA is today?
Let's unpack that in different ways. Like, how relevant is IRMA in the context of a master's degree in management? Would be probably one question. And the other question would be, how relevant is IRMA to the mission of rural development that it was started with? So if I break that into two, and there may be more aspects, Apu, and please do feel free to chime in. I think on the first one, on education that is quality education, I think the proof is in the pudding. If you look at how well the IRMA alumni do, if you look at the career trajectory and where all they've gone, I think as a postgraduate degree in management, IRMA definitely is a quality education. I believe it should get better recognition than it does today for that. If you go to the second question on the relevance in terms of what used to be the mission on the rural development side, again, I think sometimes we look at it in a different way. Just because 100% of the graduates don't go in that field does not mean that we're not making impact in that area. I think the education is such that it finds relevance in beyond just rural development, but even within rural development, both grassroots as well as international funding organizations approve. We have so many people from IRMA. It's always looked at, even for recent batches. It's not just that in the past it was and today it's not. For folks who are getting hired in both of those types of organizations, grassroots as well as funding, there is great appreciation and demand. That's my understanding. I'm not super close to it today as I was in the past, but I think for me it is yes and yes to both those questions.
Anand asks that conceptually, the last framework that you shared, which is the product, process, and people sequence, will the sequence change in some cases? Like he's specifically asked for HR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be. So,
see, talking of HR, people think it's more about people at the beginning, but it's about the product as well, I would say. The product is recruitment, their product is compensation and benefit structuring, learning and development. Those are the things that one needs to learn. Am I correct, Amaresh, there?
Absolutely. And not only that, also knowing the company, knowing a simple question that I've been asking in a lot of companies is, how does this company make money? For any company. And even for an HR person, and especially think about a recruitment person here. If the recruitment person doesn't know what this company does, they'll not be able to explain very well to any potential candidate. It'll be very, very hard. So even for an HR person, knowing not just in recruitment, but also HRPP, someone in performance management, they need to understand what does the company do and what do various functions in the company do to contribute to get there. If I have an HR business partner who does not understand risk or compliance and just has been a great HR business partner. It's great to talk to people. But if someone is talking about, this is the problem that I have, I'm not happy here because, and then follows very technical things after that. A great HR person would know the business inside out. So I think the framework still holds, Anand. And then the process piece is that if you want to, let's say someone is getting a competitive offer and you need to make a counter offer and you don't understand the process really well, how long would it take? Who all need to sign that off? When can you put that offer in front? And even if you want to do it, you won't be able to know how to really make that happen in time so that you're able to retain that person. And of course, the stakeholder management part of it, are you able to get on a call and represent that case to the chief operating officer, the CEO, CFO, whoever needs to approve that? Again, in my lame example of trying to retain an individual. So somebody who understands the context, the company, the complexity very well will be able to do that with much more finesse than someone who only understands their function.
Arshad has a very interesting question, and that matches with your experience. So, you've been in one of the oldest businesses, food, early in your career. Dates back as humankind, probably. And you've also been in something which is so new that it was not even coined, fintech. So Arshad's question is that what is the difference between, what's your perspective in terms of managing these two different businesses, two spectrums, old age businesses and modern businesses?
So the obvious differences are that the new age businesses don't have the processes figured out, and there are a lot of in terms of age of an industry or age of a company, you'll find teenagers or even children from that perspective. My current company is 80 years old in an industry that is less than 20 years old, 15 years old or so. Banking, on the other hand, is 300 years old. Citibank, when I was at Citi in India, that celebrated 100 years in India. So things have been figured out, mastered. Of course, there are changes happening, regulatory changes, political, and many other things. But the basic concepts have not changed fundamentally. They remain same, which has good and bad, like everything. It can be great training ground to build your fundamentals, understand the concepts, but it can also get constraining after a while. So on the versus new businesses, there is a lot of flux, there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of playing in the gray. Just because the regulation may not be there, you still don't know. Even right now, ethics of AI is a completely new field. People have not even started thinking about it, let alone being able to come up with regulation. When Facebook came in, regulators didn't know which category does that fit in. Is it a marketplace? Is it a media company? Like, what is it? So it's very difficult. And imagine being inside a company where the government doesn't know how to regulate you, and how do you think about that versus exactly my previous company, not the current one, which is super app across ride hailing, e-commerce, personal loan, payment, multiple business, logistics, and a combination of very regulated businesses like lending to ride hailing or food delivery, where at least in Asia, regulation hasn't really been very well developed. And I used to worry about emerging regulation, like people's allergy information can be lethal for it to leak to others. And till date, there is no regulation, I think, even around the world, but definitely not in APAC. So there are a bunch of things like that. But at the end of it, management is a broad term, Arshad. A lot of it is about managing what is known and expected, and a lot of it is about the unknown. Happy to add more to that, Arshad, if you had a different angle to it.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Amaresh, and thanks, Sushant. This has been insightful, to say the least. But my question was also around how the more sort of, traditional concepts of management have changed. Because if you look at the whole push for scale versus efficiency, profitability, that's something that has a very different connotation in, new age businesses. How do you look at that? Because we all sort of, grew up in that whole framework. We had to sort of, look for efficiency over everything else. How have you adapted?
So it's a great question, and I think there is also some sort of cyclical thinking in that. For VC funded businesses, till 2 years ago, I would say end of 22 is when the funding winter set in. But before that, it was just about scale. Growth at all costs used to be sort of the mantra. And that's where the user metrics is what everyone used to talk about. Now it's the same as any traditional businesses. It has to be profitability. It's profitable growth. It's margin impact. Those are the things that are being looked at. So some of it, like I said, this example is cyclical. It went out of fashion, profitability, but it's come right back in, and it was triggered by the interest rate changes, etc. But even today, if one is sufficiently funded well, for new businesses, new industries, revenue growth or user growth is definitely a very important metric. So irrespective of the industry, I would say a new business, would be rated on their ability to grow, because that's when they'll be commanding growth premiums. The multiples would be different for them versus a mature size company, someone who's been around. If you and I were to launch a payments company today, we would be rated differently from how PayPal is rated. Even between PayPal and Stripe, it's very different sort of metrics.
Amaresh, I'll interject you here. We'll take the last question now. Pathak ji has asked a very interesting one. So how did your experience of working in consumer business help you in, you did mention about that, but he's talked about, after the Lehman
Sales
crisis.
and marketing.
Sales and marketing, helping in investment banking was one. But how has it helped in the risk business?
It's actually very important. So from two perspectives. One, conceptually, marketing is where you choose who to do business with. And in risk and compliance, oftentimes you're choosing who not to do business with. So it's X and 1 minus X. Very simple mathematical terms. And of course, it's simplified, but I have found myself passing on risk insights to marketing and salespeople a number of times, especially marketing folks. We found ourselves leveraging risk models, and we've turned it upside down to help sales rank order the list of merchants or list of clients that they want to reactivate. And so the risk models were so sophisticated that they could be retrofitted to help them. But keeping that aside, and that is more as a function. Me personally, one of the things that I once received, one of the best compliments, I think, was that I was able to, the person said, and they were very, very senior, that when you explain something, I've heard the same thing from somebody else, and I don't understand, but when you say it, it's very clear. And he was talking about my boss. And obviously it was a great compliment, but it was also a difficult compliment to take because he was talking about comparing with my boss. But the only way I can break it down is that having been in sales, I learned how to simplify things to the audience. Like, if I'm explaining investment to someone who's an ex-army person who doesn't deal with investment so much versus someone who's dealing with stocks day in and day out, it has to be articulated differently. So that ability to simplify things and being able to pitch at the level that the audience can accept and understand has helped, not only within the company, but also with the regulators. I remember having a conversation in a tough regulatory environment where they were talking about how we let, basically analytics-based risk management versus policy-based risk management. Most of banks do policy-based risk management. Most of fintechs do analytics-based risk management. And then to be able to make that alive for a regulator so that they get confidence, I think I was leaning on a lot of my sales and marketing stints. So it has didn't intend to. I won't even say that anyone who has to go into risk must do sales and marketing. But if you have done sales and marketing, you'll likely be very successful in any other function when it comes to being able to explain it to somebody.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much, Amaresh. I would now hand this over to Ritesh. But before that, it's been insightful. It's been delightful to listen to your journey. So many different geographies, so many different careers, the way you navigated them. One thing I picked up, two actually, I would say. One, you grabbed opportunities, and two, you played well in whatever came your way. That could be the simple message for most people who are watching this. Whatever comes your way, grab it and play well, give your best. Okay. Over to you, Ritesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dushinder. First of all, thank you, Amaresh, for such an amazing and insightful session. It gives most of us, and especially me, a feeling of joy and an accomplishment to listen to Amaresh, who has such diverse skills and experience. And as Amaresh and also Dushinder repeated it, that you made the most of what you got, and the way you explained to us audience, it was very inspiring for us. Also, thanks to both of you for taking your time, preparing it well, and again coming on a weekend so that you can add something to our IRMA community. Coming back to Dushinder, thanks for moderating this session wonderfully. The way you pick up the sequence, pick up the questions, and summarize it, it's beautiful. And I would also like to thank to the audience here because the questions which come from you adds so much to the preparation or to the presentation done by Amaresh. And last, I would just like to give a brief about why, in a very short explanation of why we started this talk. Generally, this idea came up for 2.5 years back, and we try to invite alumni from diverse professional, entrepreneurial, and academic background to share their knowledge, experience, and skills, similar to what Amaresh has done today. And we believe that there are so many bright individuals in our community. If we even invest, say, 1 hour, like Amaresh and Dushinder have done, it will add so much to our community. So if you know someone in your batch or senior batch or junior batches, please let them know about this IRMAN talks and request them to get in touch with our team, and we will take this forward. Today's recording will be updated on YouTube within 24 hours. And the alumni who have missed this opportunity to listen to Amaresh can go to that link, which we will share across the group, and listen to him. And with Amaresh permission, I can share his contact details with the alumni. If they have any specific questions or queries or advice from Amaresh and also Dushinder, who's a career coach, you both can be contacted. Now I will stop the recording, and if should you wish to continue informally, you can do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ritesh. Thank you, Alumni Association. Appreciate it. And Dushyant, I couldn't have picked up a better co-pilot than you. Thank you for making time. Thanks everyone for joining.